This next question, I have a hard time reading it here. It says, I know the first one says homosexuality.
That's right.
Jewish people in the Supreme Court.
Can you read this rest of it?
Oh, you can't read my.
I can. I'm sorry.
I want to talk about how the Hasidic and ultra-Orthodox Jewish community deals with homosexuality.
Okay, so is that what it says there?
Yeah. Well, I shortened it because I gave you a longer thing. Both as, we have Jewish gay rabbis, because they're not Orthodox rabbis.
So, so like this. Hasidic, I don't know anything about the Hasidic community, I'm saying let's try to talk about what the Torah says about homosexuality first. So, but I think that we have to. I think this is where our preamble to discussion has to, take place. The Torah gives us a lot of things that are prohibitions and things that we can't do. We have to have the humility to realize that we don't necessarily understand why the Torah prohibits or permits or instructs us. Why? Because we're humans and thus have limited intellectual capabilities. And when the Almighty says, don't mix wool and linen and don't wear, and it doesn't make any sense to us. There's no way for human intellect to wrap our heads around a particular prohibition. We realize that this is not of human conception. Thus, we don't necessarily understand it. I think when we talk about the Torah is clear. It's clear. There's no way to deny Torah is against homosexuality. That being said, homosexuality is a broad term. It's specifically against I would call male homosexuality, as opposed to it seems like by Torah law, being a lesbian or acting as a lesbian would not be prohibited. That's what's interesting. So while it's grouped together, typically in America, in Torah law, it's not grouped together whatsoever. And I think, when you have such a conflict between, I think, what we could describe as the evolving perception on a certain matter in today's society versus what the Torah says, you basically present with two options. In 1996, we have the Defense of Marriage Act, and we have come a long way. Whichever, it's a progress or regression, either way, however you want to look at it. The collective perspective on this issue has radically changed very, very fast. I think, I remember reading, I was reading William L. Shirer's book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Great book. And he's talking about one of Hitler's lieutenants, I remember who was a homosexual. And he writes, just that's the way he writes, like someone who was of such deprived or depraved or bizarre sexual interest. Like, he writes that, and I was like, "Oh, you wouldn't write that today." It's really in 1979. It's not so long ago. I wasn't around yet, but the DSM-3, which is the manual for psychological illnesses, included homosexuality. So you've gone from 30, 40 years, basically, you've gone from society at large treating homosexuality as a illness on par with bipolar disease and schizophrenia in the same book to being something which is widely accepted. But now we're at the point where society has widely accepted it, and we say, this is what we want, let them be.
But can a case be made, Rabbi, that if this went to its extreme, which I agree most things don't go to this ultimate extreme, it means the extinction of...
Listen, it happened to the Greeks.
That's my point.
Yes. Okay, but I'm saying most, that doesn't change the underlying the question. It means, I think we look at it from the Torah's perspective as an ideal, but also as, politically,
Is it also fair to say, I don't mean it, but just
go ahead.
Picking up on what you said when you give the example of linen and wool.
Yeah.
Now, can we agree that the Torah finds far more problem in its rhetoric with homosexuality than mixing linen and wool?
Yeah,
I think that's pretty...
Rank.
It's far more condemned.
Yeah.
Homosexuality is far more boisterously condemned in the Torah than mixing.
It's not so boisterous. It's one verse.
Oh, yeah,
What it
sure.
says is that it is an abomination.
Yes.
It
How-
doesn't
But remember-
call linen and wool an abomination.
But
Just a
But it's not a
minute.
sin.
There are
You
many
shouldn't make it an
instances in the
abomination.
Bible in which there are things called abomination.
So,
Yeah, but they are worse.
So,
Those
well, I
are
wanna hear
worse
the
than the
rabbi
things that are not.
respond to this. So is there some like priority thing? Like if someone has a cheeseburger, a prohibition of Torah, is that worse than someone engaging in a homosexual act? Is the Torah raped them?
You didn't commit as bad as
Boom.
you know.
I mean,
I could talk for hours
Torah
about
raped
it.
them.
Okay. Wait,
Well, listen, why would
let's.
God, if God's the Almighty, and He's putting it, and He gave the Torah to Moses, saying that it's an abomination for a man to lay down with another man or whatever, how come, and my opinion is
Yeah.
genetic,
How come?
how come that homosexuality
See,
exists?
this is the better
Genetic
question than what
thing.
you asked in your.
Well,
This is the right.
this is-
I was hoping someone would ask this question. That's the question. We'll get to what you said. First, we'll frame the question. We'll get to what you said, and then we'll get to the real
Well, I was
question.
curious how what the
Excellent. We have arrived. Perfect. I'm very happy here. Let's first frame the problem. The problem is going to be that our attitude. I don't think if we were having a discussion 50 years ago, I don't think that people that it would have been as dynamic. I think for better or for worse. That's just the reality. So today we're kind of at a conflict, tension between what the Torah says and what we believe as a society. We talk about generally. Some people obviously don't. It's still an ongoing debate. So this is going to present us, number one, with a moral problem, number two, with like a political problem. Like, what do you say in politics in support of gay marriage? I think that's one thing. And then there's more of like the broader moral perspective of the Torah doing something or prohibiting something we find to be perfectly natural. And that kind of leads into your question. So I think from a political perspective, I think, I'm not sure, but I think that all of us would agree that we don't want our laws in the United States to be governed by Torah law. I think it's fair. Even the most radical or the most observant or the most ultra-Orthodox or the most Hasidic Jew in the world would argue that the streets should be closed on Shabbat. There shouldn't be any commerce allowed on Shabbat. Internet should shut down on Shabbat because it's prohibited by Torah law. Why? Because, listen, we don't want our government to be governed by Christian law or by Muslim law or by Jewish law. It's a very good thing for us that one of the reasons why America has been so hospitable to Jews, because at the core of the fabric of the nation is separation of church and state, freedom of religion. That's a very, very good thing for us. So I think politically we could say, whichever side of the issue you're on, I don't think you'll run afoul with Torah law. You can say, listen, I believe that the Torah prohibits homosexuality, yet I don't think that should be the law of the land. I think that's a legitimate perspective. I think there's room for debate on that. But let's even assume that we believe the Torah is from the Almighty and it's 1,000% true and it's prohibited to do homosexuality, prohibited by Jewish law. I still think the door is open for someone to argue and defend politically, if they so choose, that gay marriage should be permitted. No problem. There's no reason why religion should dominate the debate on political matters. That's number one. But I think number two, from a moral perspective, this creates conflict. There's no way for it to not create conflict. But our options are very limited. What we could choose to do is either we could choose to try to change the Torah, pervert the Torah. There are those that wrote books that said, that says don't lie with another man like you do with a woman, thus, trying to really use, just textual chicanery to try to just twist what you believe into the Torah. I believe that this must be the goal. Thus, the Torah seems to be a problem. Let's twist and turn the Torah until it conforms to what I believe. That is one way you could go about it. Or you could say, listen, I don't know why the Torah prohibits anything. However, I believe from the Torah, and I'm humble enough to say this is something which I don't understand fully. I prefer to choose the latter. I prefer to say when I don't understand something in the Torah, I don't have the arrogance to say, this is not from God. Let's take a scalpel. Let's cut out this verse from the Torah. Let's keep the other 5,844 verses. This verse, because I don't agree with it, or society has evolved to not agree with it, to discount it. By accepting the Torah as being from the Almighty, we're accepting it to be immutable. And it's immutable to anything that we say, and to anything that society says. And no matter how far society moves down along the line of accepting homosexuality as a normal thing, if you're going to accept the Torah, you have to say, listen, the Torah is against it. But does that have to create a crisis? It doesn't have to. You can say, listen, I don't understand why I don't understand it, and that's fine. Having the humility to say you don't know something is a very, very healthy thing to have. However, when someone says, I know that this is wrong because society has evolved to believe that it's wrong, and therefore I'm either going to change the Torah or delete it, I think that's where you run into the big problems. That's where things get very hairy. That is a mistake. Moving on to what Dan said in the hierarchy, and I think this is a very important point because for whatever reason, people are very disturbed by this particular mitzvah that a lot of people in the world are not in agreement with. But I think we talk about any other mitzvah in the Torah. The Torah says don't write on Shabbat. Writing 2 letters on Shabbat is as detestable by Torah as homosexuality. Yet somehow, people, Orthodox shuls have their garage, their parking lots open, and people drive there. And
Respect, Rabbi, can
yes.
you elaborate on that? Where can you cite in Scripture that it makes it just as? Does it call writing on Shabbat an abomination?
As to it being labeled an abomination, it does not. However, when the Jewish court was in session, and Jewish law was enforced, the punishment that was meted out for desecration of Shabbat was the same punishment meted out for homosexuality. Thus, that's the commonality that they share. You're right; it doesn't say the word abomination, but still, it puts it on par, at least on that level. Now, do I think that people that write 2 words on Shabbat should be vilified? No. Do I think that people that eat cheeseburgers should be vilified? Also not. Why do we have to vilify, or why does it have to be such a great conflict with people that don't follow or don't observe that particular law of the Torah? It means, yes, the Torah is in conflict with that, and the Torah is in conflict with other ways of life that we find to be, very acceptable.
What are the other things in Torah, though, that do address it as being an abomination?
Well, the question is are we going to infer from the fact that Torah labels an abomination any particular tangible relevance to that? The Torah says don't sleep with your mother-in-law. That's also an abomination. Does that mean that, it's labeling it as an abomination? The actual significance of that is not so clear.
It's not lying considered an abomination?
I think what would be the significance, though, is the punishment that the Torah provides. And like you said,
So
you're going to sit there and say, homosexuals are horrible people for doing that, when you're doing something that's in violation too. It's another reason why to be a little more accepting if you're doing something that would warrant into capital punishment under the Sanhedrin court as well.
Are you suggesting that people in glass houses should not smoke?
Exactly.
my feeling is, if you're going to evaluate
A
levels, if it doesn't affect other people, if you're the only one involved, I think I should have a lesser crime.
Listen, that argument for political argument is popular, but if you actually follow that to its true conclusion, that consenting adults will do whatever they want, there's no reason why homosexual marriage should be permitted and polygamy should be prohibited. Remember, if you're abandoning the traditional perspective of marriage, of one man, one woman, and you're allowing anything that consenting adults, not harming anyone else, there's no reason why polygamy should be prohibited. And you know what? You'll argue that homosexuality is natural. Polygamy is also natural.
Yeah,
okay?
But polygamy, at least as it's practiced in the United States, and I've been to Colorado City, Arizona, where the 5,000 live. They're all on they're all on welfare. Of course it affects us. You have 14 wives and 30 kids. We're paying for that.
It's okay if you can afford it, but it's not
Yes.
okay.
Well,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we also, so it does affect, but homosexuality can also affect. We've just agreed there is the Greek empire collapse because of it.
I
So
think it goes
you can't
against
say
the
that
moral
didn't
law
have a
of
detrimental
procreation.
effect
Yes.
Listen,
Listen, that's
it simply does
you know,
that. Either
it's clear
direction.
that there are different perspectives of the issue. And that's okay. I think.
So address the
Yes. Yes. Okay. So your question is like this is what I want. This I think I think is more of a legitimate question. How is it fair, basically, for the Torah to prohibit something which is perfectly natural? Would you agree? And this might sound crude, remember, but we're having this conversation, right? You open the door to this conversation. Would you not agree that it's possible to say that some people are genetically predisposed to pedophilia? Well, I'm not comparing pedophilia to homosexuality. Let's not take that sound.
I absolutely.
Okay. Yet.
But they're not allowed to act on it.
Well, yes.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's put that question aside.
Obviously, it's a compulsion.
Would you agree?
It's a compulsion, yes.
Would you agree that it's perfectly natural for a lot of people to covet someone else's wife?
Yeah.
Perfectly natural. Absolutely. I think probably more people covet other people's wives than want to sleep with, people of same sex. Yet the Torah prohibits it. The Torah prohibits it on pain of capital punishment. Adultery is seen very, very, very seriously.
It's different than if you're just looking at somebody.
Okay. Yet, so clearly we say, a simpler example. Is it possible that the Torah prohibited something which is very desirous, like cheeseburgers? It's perfectly natural, I think. I haven't had tasted one before. But I've never in my life tasted one. How is it?
Cited one
Good?
about not sleeping.
Bacon cheeseburgers.
You come down to choices now.
So the point is that the Torah...
You always have a choice of who you can sleep with.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
You always have a choice with who you can sleep with. I was in conversation with Rabbi in the Temple Beth Shalom, where we were members there, and we used to have lunch once a week. And we got into this conversation, and he was citing all the normal arguments and everything. And I said, yes, there's people that are probably genetically presupposed to have
homosexual tendencies.
Yeah, but you always have a choice of who you sleep with. And he didn't have an answer for that.
So, but the fact that the Torah prohibits you from doing something that you naturally would desire, I'm saying almost all prohibitions of Torah things.
Self-discipline.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, is it easy? Of course not. Do you think it's easy for someone who has same-sex attraction to withhold on that? Probably not. Do you think it's easy for someone who has heterosexual tendencies and is married to a lovely woman to not covet someone else's wife or desire that? Also very natural, I think. Very natural. But the Torah is about, like we said, we mention this every time. The Torah is about educating us.
you just said, and I didn't even know this was in there, about not sleeping with your mother-in-law. I didn't know that was in there. I didn't know somebody's mother-in-law might look pretty good to somebody else. And so, it could be very natural to be so inclined that way.
And there's many, many natural things that the Torah...
Pardon?
Pedophilias have been abused themselves. But the large majority of people who are pedophilias have been abused themselves. I mean, they learned that from somebody.
So you're suggesting it's environmental as opposed to...
This argument, let's settle it here now.
The key is acting or not acting.
Like with the Catholic, I felt that a lot of the priests who were involved went to that sort of very controlled, comfortable environment.
You've got the moral problem of procreation, which you're commanded to procreate. That's the first thing. And the second thing, you always have a choice of who you sleep with.
Yeah, but there's a lot of pressure on the back.
It's a different moral structure than writing 2 letters on Shabbat.
All right, next topic.
Okay, so...
Ever onward.